This study that we're going to go through this morning is kind of spun off of what Brother Jerry spoke on when he last spoke about Barnabas, and just him being a encourager, the kind of personality that he was. Just we studied that character, and it got me thinking about a lot of different things. And one of those things that he is well known for is a situation that he is integral in. And that spun into a lot of different things to think about, considering the implications, the people involved, and it made me want to do a character study on John Mark. But you can't really do a study on John Mark without really talking about the biggest thing that he's known for, which then led to this whole different sermon coming out of this. And I titled it, "When Good People Hurt Each Other." When good people hurt each other. It's a study about grace and failure, and at times the people we write off. The study is going to be kind of focused between Acts chapter 12 through 15. That's really where you're going to get most of the information that we're going to talk about. We're going to be in other areas, but I want to start by saying I'm being very vague at this point because we're going to get into the story in a minute. But I wanted to lay out, this comes from a different source, but it's something that struck a nerve pretty hard with me as I was looking through. And I don't know if it's the older I am getting, the more things are impacting me because I'm looking at my own life and seeing all the flaws and failures and all those things, so I'm trying to correct those things. But good people can hurt each other while still being faithful, while still being righteous, while still being godly. We can be faithful to God and still be divided. We're going to start in Acts chapter 15, verse 39, the first part of it. The contention became so strong that they parted from one another. If you know what this is talking about in general, it's talking about Paul and Barnabas. The contention, the struggle between them became so strong and so sharp that they said, you know what? Let's go two different ways. It's much easier to just do this. And as you think about it, you're talking about a couple of people that were leaders in the first century, the early church, leaders in God's kingdom. They were faithful Christians. Paul was a faithful man. He wrote half the New Testament. Barnabas, the encourager, helped usher Paul into being integrated into the apostles. Leaders, strong people in the church. They both were founded in sound doctrine. Even in their disagreement and what they were disagreeing about, were both in sound doctrine. They were both right from that perspective, biblically speaking. Yet that did not keep them from having a very real and harsh, hard conflict. I want us to understand that realistically within the church of God, churches of Christ, we have people with millions and millions of personalities in different thought-sos, in different perspectives on how life has treated them, and it frames how they view things. And you can be faithful, you can be sound in doctrine, and you can still have real conflicts with each other. Because the reality is, being godly doesn't mean that you're flawless. Being godly and faithful does not mean that you don't have struggles or blind spots. Disagreements doesn't automatically mean you're rebelling against God or against this other person and that you hate this person. It doesn't mean that all the time. Sometimes you can be a godly person and have a different perspective and choose to think differently based on what you have experienced. And that can be okay. We have our own blind spots. We have our own struggles. James chapter 3, the first part says, we all struggle in many ways. Every single one of us. Paul had his struggles as a faithful man, as a faithful Christian. Barnabas had his struggles as a faithful man, as a faithful Christian, sound in doctrine. And I think we have to understand the reality of the fact that good people can hurt each other because we all struggle with different things, different perspectives, different viewpoints. That is a scenario that we find ourselves in when we're talking about this story in Acts chapter 15. And it really starts a little bit earlier. Like I said, chapter 12 is when the situation actually occurs. But to get to that, you have to understand the characters of the story. We know Paul. We've done a great study on him last year. We understand who this man was. We just did a recent study on Barnabas, so we understand that man. But I want to talk about John Mark. John Mark was somebody who was not unfamiliar with the church, with God, with the Christian faith. Acts chapter 12, verse 12 says, so when he had considered this, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together to pray. This situation is when Peter has been thrown into prison and then he is miraculously released. Where does he go? Where does Peter go? He looks for a place that is safe, that is well known, something that he can go to because this is where God's people are. And it was John Mark's house. His mother, that's where the church gathered, a place that the church gathered in Jerusalem. When Herod was persecuting, that was one of the places that you could go. He was raised around the church, the early church. He was ground floor. He was there. He got to talk to the apostles. Peter came to his house and communed and talked and prayed together. He spent time getting to know this person. Not only that, he knew the cost because guess what? Peter came there after he was thrown in prison. He watched it. He knew what the cost was to be an apostle, to be a disciple of Christ. This was not somebody who just walked off the street and became a Christian and said, okay, I don't know what I'm getting into. This is a man who knew what the cost was, what was there. Not only that, he had family ties to Barnabas, one of the apostles, one of the people sent. He was family to this person. There was an expectation tied to that. He knew. Not only was he close and not new to the faith, if you will, but he was selected. I want you to think about this. This is the inaugural mission trip, the very first that was going to happen. Commissioned by the church. This is what we're doing. Paul and Barnabas are selected to go on this trip, and who do they pick? Who do they pick to be their assistant? Not just some random person that they don't know. Not just somebody that is new to the faith. He was trusted with the responsibility to go with them. He was given an opportunity to go and participate and be a part. He was invited to the mission work. This young man had a lot of opportunity given to him. And let's be honest, there was a lot expected of him because of where he came from, because of what he witnessed. And I know a lot of times when we look at this and we see John Mark, and when I look at John Mark, I see, how on earth do you walk away? How does that happen? And I have struggled in the past of looking at this person and saying, he just ran and left this group of hardworking Christians doing the right thing. I don't know the situation, but that's my perspective. Has been my perspective. He just left him in the lurch. How dare he? But realistically, Luke doesn't tell us what happened, why he left. We know he did. We know Paul was upset. But we don't know what drove that. It could have been that his mother was sick and was about to die, and he wanted to spend the last few minutes of his life, or her life, there. Not his life. Possibility? Sure. It could have been that he was sick and wanted to go home, needed to go home, or else he would have died. It could have also been, I did not realize this was going to be hard. I'm not cut out for this, so I'm going to quit. That is a possibility. He could have been just a sissy and couldn't handle it, couldn't cut it, didn't have the mental fortitude to handle the persecution that was happening. But Luke doesn't give us a reason or an excuse. He just states the fact and moves on. I really, truly believe the Spirit of God did that on purpose. Because guess what? It doesn't really matter what happened. The reality is, he failed. Missed that one. He failed. There was a lot expected of him. In Luke chapter 12, verse 48 says, "For everyone to whom much is given, from him much will be required, and to whom much has been committed of him, they will ask the more." You know, that's a real truth and principle that we have in the church. When you've been given opportunity, when you've been around the church, and you understand how things work, you understand what's required of you, there's an natural expectation that you are going to fulfill those things in an accurate way. That there's less opportunity for you to fail. Right or wrong, that's just the reality. We expect that from people. The responsibility matches and matched the opportunity. That expectation would not have been put or placed on somebody who was coming in as a complete brand new person to the faith. The expectation that you will endure, you will follow through, you will preach the gospel would not have been placed on somebody who was brand new to the faith. That's unreasonable to expect that. But the responsibility matched the opportunity, and he failed. There it is. Luke doesn't hide this. Luke doesn't shy away from it. Because the reality is it happened. But he also doesn't linger on it. You know, there are times where we could linger on those failings. We could. Rightfully so, even. Because we have a perspective of something happened that is ruining what's going on. Sure. But the Bible clearly defines what happened, says it, and moves on. And I really, truly believe that the reason for that is for us to internally look at some things. We're going to get into the story. Now, Barnabas was determined to take with them John called Mark. But Paul insisted that they should not take with them the one who had departed from them in Pamphylia and had not gone to them to the work. Then the contention became so sharp that they parted from one another, so that Barnabas took Mark and sailed to Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and departed. I know I'm jumping from describing all the things with John Mark directly into this confrontation, but this sets it up. When they were on the first missionary journey, John left. Paul is extremely upset about this. And now, the second missionary journey, Barnabas wants to take Mark. Wants to potentially give him another opportunity, give him another chance. And Paul says, no. I'm not going to lie to you, I get that. I get that. I gave you a chance. I needed you. I needed you, and you didn't come through. Why put myself in that position again? When I know Silas has the ability to do it, and he won't forsake me. Why put myself through that? The mission is more important than trying to coddle you into doing what you're supposed to do. I get that. And I'm telling you, for the longest time, Paul was right. Paul was 100% right. But the question really is, and I'm putting out, who was right in this situation? I asked a few people this question. One person gave me the right answer. But what is your natural inclination in this scenario? Your natural inclination, human inclination. I heard one person, Paul's right. Heard another person, Barnabas is right. From another person, I heard both of them are right. Who is right to you? Because the reality is Paul is right because he's mission driven. Like I said before, why am I going to take somebody who's going to fail? And I know I have witnessed it happen. Why am I going to trust that? He was protecting the work. His vision was, I need the work to occur. Souls are dying and going to hell. They matter more than taking care of your... What word am I looking for? Nephews. Thank you. His brother was coming to my head. I was like, he's not his brother. His cousin. The mission is more important than your cousin. He valued reliability and getting the work done. And he wanted to minimize the risk to the church globally. Was he right in those things? Absolutely. 100% right. Confidence in an unfaithful man in a time of trouble is like a bad tooth and a foot out of joint. It's a pain. You can't function well. So why put yourself through that? So does that automatically mean Barnabas was wrong then? Barnabas was people-driven. He wanted to restore people. He gave Paul the destroyer of churches. He gave Paul an opportunity to become integrated into God's people, God's church, to be a trusted member of God's family, a leader. He gave him that opportunity because he took a chance on him and restored the person. He believed in growth, and he created opportunities. Is he right for that? Absolutely. I would not be here today if people did not give me opportunities. I would not be here today if people did not try to restore me in my failings. You who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness. That is a godly principle. These are both godly principles, strong, fundamental godly principles. And they are both right. And our perspective on both of those sometimes causes tension within our own group. Because sometimes we value one a little bit more than the other. Or vice versa. Paul strongly valued the mission. Barnabas strongly valued gentleness and meekness and restoring people. He was an encourager. God cared about both. He cares about both. Both of those can happen at the same time. In fact, in the church, that has to happen at the same time. We cannot be one way or the other. We have to have both in balance. Because Jesus himself says when he saw the multitude, he was moved with compassion. He had a heart to restore his people. But he also said, go and preach the gospel to every creature. Both of those things are needed. Wisdom seeks to balance both of those. Christians and people in our church, we have to balance those things. One can't outweigh the other. Because to keep the mission going, you have to have people. And people are flawed. People will fail. Will we restore? Your restoration, though, doesn't make the mission any less important. So be a person that works the mission as a person that's restored. You know, forgiveness isn't the same as trust. That is a hard truth. It is not the same. You can be forgiven because that's restoring the relationship with whoever you have wronged. And it's a desire from you to somebody else or somebody else to you to mend the relationship and restore it and work to restore it. And we are asked or told to forgive over and over again because the relationship is important. But that does not mean that trust has to be given. Because trust restores responsibility. I am entrusting you to care for my heart. I'm entrusting you to care for the work that I do with you. I'm entrusting you to have my back. I can forgive you, but still protect myself in the work. I'm using this a little bit out of context. I understand. This is about deacons. But the principle applies. Tested. Let them first be tested. deacons and elders and evangelists that you have placed your trust in have earned that by being tested, by proving that they can handle the responsibility, and have earned that. In Paul's mind, John Mark had not earned that. He wasn't there. Barnabas, on the other hand, says, how was he supposed to get there if you never give him an opportunity? That hits hard. But forgiveness is not the same. And both of these views can get so off kilter from what God expects from us because we have a perspective. Because at the end of the day, restoration requires discernment. How do you do both of those? How do you forgive and you still give them trust at some level? Discernment. Wisdom in how you do it. Galatians 6, verse 1, brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. This is a formula of how you use discernment. Not everybody needs to be doing the restoring. Maturity is needed for the person that's going to restore. I would like us to look at Paul. I love Paul so much because to me he's a picture of me. And when this is happening with John Mark, Paul is new. Relatively new still. He is all fire. Because he's been forgiven for so much, he knew what he was. I will not tolerate anybody less than that to do this work, because we have to save souls. I am going to throw out to you this morning that he lacked a little maturity here when it came to dealing with people. Not in his knowledge, not in his apostleship, not in any of that, in relationships with people. Because he struggled with people still hating him. And so I'm going to swing the complete opposite direction and prove to you guys I am not that person. So if you can't handle it, get out of my way. Barnabas was a man who was familiar with restoring. He was the mature one in this situation. And he was the one trying to restore. You have to do it gently, not carelessly. Gentle but not careless. And this is where I feel like Paul saw Barnabas saying, what are you doing? You saw this guy, what he did. You're being careless. Not only that, earlier in Galatians, which we'll talk about in a minute, Barnabas is easily persuaded. The idea of restore here is like setting a bone. It's not just, bing, it's done. It's like setting a bone. Too much pressure, and you destroy what you're trying to restore. Not enough pressure, and you don't actually heal anything. It takes the right amount to set the bone. Considering yourself with humility, restoring someone. It's easy as Christians, as humans, it's easy to look at a situation and look at the people Whether it's parenting, whether it's addiction, whether it's whatever it is, pick it. Pick the item, the thing, church work, whatever. And to say, I don't do that. I'm going to help you. Talk about the maturity. Talk about the gentleness. There's pride that we have to watch out for. The reality is what you're trying to do is restore, not show them how much of a failure they still are. Maybe they don't do things as good as you do. Maybe they're not the greatest with people. Gently, and with humility, help them. If you can be mature enough to do that, with the goal of restoring. Because a lot of times what happens is our strengths that we value and we like end up becoming our blind spots. What I mean by that, we can overextend those strengths and expect that from other people. And when they don't do that, we are disappointed because that's not me. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't struggle with that. Why are you? I'm not saying we do that intentionally. But if we're talking about our human reaction, that's what we do. We expect those things. If I don't struggle, you shouldn't. The strengths we value can sometimes limit what we can see and limit what we can value in other people. Paul and Barnabas. Paul valued the mission, and that was a strength, but he couldn't see the value of restoring Mark at that time. Barnabas saw Mark and said, this guy needs help. And he said, you know what, the mission is okay, but he needs help. Those strengths become blind spots. Knowledge and understanding of our particular thoughts can sometimes puff us up. Knowledge of our strengths and understanding of our strengths and expectations builds it up in our own head. Love should knock that down and say, I get that I may have this strength, but he has another strength that's going to help. The blind spot. We danced around a little bit. Paul had unapplied mercy, was a blind spot to him. He received an immense amount of mercy. The destroyer of churches became an apostle and leader in the churches. James, Peter, all these men now work with this guy because of what Barnabas did. He preached about grace over and over and over again. In nearly every one of his books, he talks about grace and mercy. But he struggled to apply it himself to somebody who failed him. He struggled to give him mercy. He says, this is a faithful saying, worthy of all acceptance, that Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am chief. He understood the amount of mercy and grace given to him. However, for this reason I obtained mercy, that in me first, Jesus Christ might show all long-suffering. Patience? Interesting. A pattern to those who go on to believe on him for everlasting life. So you like the idea that God gave you mercy, but when somebody else fails you, nope. And this thought comes to my mind at this point in time in Paul's journey, in Paul's life. The unforgiving servant. should you not have had compassion on your fellow servant, just as I had pity on you? The same way I had forgave you for all of your flaws, should you not have had the same pity on John Mark, who for quite a lot less, you were throwing him to the curb? John Mark was not killing Christians and hauling them off. John Mark was not destroying God's work. I don't know. There may have been a sinful reason why John left. John Mark left. I'm not going to try to sit here and say that that is the case. But I do know he was not destroying the church and killing people. He went home. In comparison, you would think Paul would have had a lot more mercy for this man. Barnabas had unguarded gentleness. He valued encouragement. He believed in restoration. He applied grace to Paul and wanted to do the same to Mark, did do the same to Mark. But personalities like that, not always, I've got a caveat. Personalities like that enjoy people and want people restored and want those things, usually lower their guard when it's put under pressure. Let me give you the example. And the rest of the Jews also played the hypocrite with him so that even Barnabas was carried away in their hypocrisy. Barnabas, the man that restored Paul, is led away by Peter in his hypocrisy to not commune and spend time with the Gentiles. You take a personality like that and a person who values people. I'm going to spend time with I want to go over here. Spend time with my brothers and sisters, the Jews. Peter's here. let me go over here. He lowers his guard because of gentleness and trying to get along. That's what I'm trying to get to. Trying to get along, trying to mend relationships. And sometimes that's what happens. We're unwilling to confront the situation honestly because we prefer to make peace. We have to be able to speak the truth in love. Not tossed about. Not just choosing to make peace with this person here and then, okay, we're going to make peace with this person over here because we just want to get everybody to get along. That's the most important thing. We cannot compromise the mission for peace. That is an uncomfortable truth to hear, isn't it? Because peace is good. We want peace. But the mission that God placed on every Christian is more important than that. If the person that you're trying to restore will not listen and is choosing to continue in sin and continuing to choose to not follow God, seeking peace there does not make sense. The mission is important. And you have to love them enough to say the mission is more important than our relationship. The blind spots led Paul to have a conviction, a strong conviction without mercy, and led to harshness. Barnabas, gentleness without discernment, led to a vulnerability that unfortunately led him astray. And the reality is we see things our way instead of God's way sometimes. This is what we should be doing. knowing our weakness, knowing our strengths, seeing the blind spots that they create in ourselves, and be willing to be open and work with each other according to the effectual working by which part every part does its share. Barnabas's share, was to restore Mark. That was his part, the crucial part that he played. Paul's crucial part, was the mission trips, the writings. Those worked together. We, as Christians, have to be open to work together in these things. Yes, you may have a strength of being mission-driven. Yes, you may have a strength of being people-driven. What we cannot do is look across the aisles and say, you don't love people. You don't care about the mission. We have to work together in those things because both of those parties together make the church what God wants. Because God makes right and restores. God made those things right. Because guess what happened out of this? It was uncomfortable. It was not good from a human perspective, but what happened? 2 different mission trips happened. Barnabas and Mark went to Cyrus and worked there. Paul and Silas went everywhere else. 2 trips, 2 avenues and routes, and 2 teams came out of this. God's mission still was accomplished. God still did what was right, made right. And Mark was given an opportunity to grow. He was given an opportunity to be restored. Paul grew as a leader because he watched Mark making the right decisions time and time again. Trust wasn't there, but it slowly started to build. Watching Mark not give up. Watching Mark continue to endure. To the point that in one of the letters, he's talking about Mark being there with him working. He became useful to Paul. It took time, but God made right and restored. It's our imperative to use our strengths to glorify God, not to condemn others. So, if you're John Mark in these situations, maybe you failed. Maybe you're the one that failed. You stepped away. You knew better. You grew up in the church, around the church, all of those things, and you failed. Make it right. Pure and simple, make it right. Don't cover those sins. Don't hide from your failings. Confess and forsake them. I can confidently say that John Mark forsook those failings. And he corrected those things. Because he became useful. He was useful to Paul in multiple ways. He wrote the Gospel of Mark. He helped Peter write the eyewitness account of Jesus. Not too shabby for somebody who was thrown off the side of the road. Not too shabby to have that much trust placed in you after you're failing. Return humbly. Don't defend your failures. Be honest about them. Yeah, I failed. Yes, that happened. But that is not who I am anymore. And do not rush restoration. What will drive you to rush restoration and expect trust to be given back to you? What's going to do that? It's not humility. To feel that you are justifiably, I need the responsibility. Don't do that. Trust is rebuilt over a series of good decisions over and over again after the failure. Maybe you're Barnabas. Maybe you're the person who sees potential in others, and you're really good at seeing potential in others when others don't. You're seeing the diamond in the rough, and we're looking at it. That's a block of coal right there. And you want to be a person, and you enjoy encouraging others. And you love watching your encouragement brighten up somebody's life and see that build them up to make good decisions. And you hate giving up on people. A man of great wrath will suffer punishment, for if you rescue him, you will have to do it again. Those are all admirable traits. But be careful. This verse, or this principle that's being taught here, is a person who is habitually angry and has a problem with that and suffers punishment for it, and you go over there and help him and rescue him and keep stepping in, you're going to have to keep doing it over and over and over and over again because he's not learning his lesson. What's the idea? Don't step in too early. Encourage wisely. Not just, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Don't rescue that person. Allow the process to occur. Let the restoration process happen with rebuilding trust with good decisions over and over again. Don't expect somebody else to change who they are because you keep rescuing them. They're never going to do it. Let them make the choice to change, to be restored. And don't ignore the warning signs that you see of continually having to rescue somebody. And say, okay, you're not getting it. I have to let you fail to learn the lesson. Maybe, and hopefully, out of love, tough love, you're saying, I love you enough that I want you restored. I'm just not going to keep enabling your failure. Barnabas could have been doing that with Mark. We know that it wasn't because of all the good that comes out of it, but he could have been doing that. Maybe you're Paul. You value the endurance and reliability, and you protect the mission, and you have been burned before by those that have not cared about that or have failed in that. Paul, later in his life, writes this. Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, and long-suffering, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, man, doesn't that sound like what's happening? Even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. I'm reading between the lines here. Artistic license, but I wonder if Paul was thinking about John Mark when he wrote this. And thinking, man, I messed up in how I handled that. He wasn't wrong, but I messed up in how I handled it. Because I didn't apply the mercy that I received. I was hardened and I became harsh. And I looked at a soul, a son of God, as a liability. I reduced Mark to a liability and a risk rather than valuing his soul and what he could do. So who was right? I hope your answer is I don't know, or both of them. Well, I hope you don't say I don't know. I hope you say both of them. You know, I had this image through the whole sermon, if you saw in the background. The first time you saw this image, it was broken pieces. Just laid out there, broken pieces. But if you were watching through that, you started seeing different things show up. The gold filament between the shards of broken pottery. Broken people like Mark who fail. When they're thrown away, they have no purpose, they have no use, they have no value. And sometimes we look at it that way. But an encourager like Barnabas, a person who values them and chooses to mend and put the pieces together and work not effortlessly, with a lot of effort to get these pieces together. And the fire of Paul to say, you need to be useful. And then once he is restored, you say, you are useful. Let's get to work. That together makes the kingdom. That becomes this bowl that has these beautiful lines of gold in the broken spaces, filling in the gaps and failures and being useful to whatever purpose you have. This is a Japanese practice of taking bowls and pottery to do that with. And you should look at the beautiful pottery that ends up happening after that. With these silver, precious metals lining these vases, these bowls, these cups. And they hold liquid, they hold the water. There is no leaks or anything. It's useful and beautiful. It doesn't hide the cracks. It doesn't keep the failings hidden. It uses those things and fills them in with precious metals. Mark became this bowl. So as a church, who are we going to be? Are we going to be the people that only see the mission and forget the people? Or are we going to be the people that only care about restoring each other and forget God almost completely in His truth? Are we going to be both of those together so that we can restore those that come in and create beautiful pottery with them?